The blood-red sunrise painted the snow-covered plains of Colorado Territory as Francine Galloway stared at the retreating wagon, her hopes disappearing with it into the vast winter landscape of 1873. Abandoned by the family who had promised to take her west to a new life, she stood alone, the cruel December wind cutting through her threadbare coat as the blizzard approached from the north. Francine pulled her shawl tighter, her fingers numb with cold, watching her breath form clouds in the frigid air. 22 years old and alone in the wilderness, she had trusted the wrong people. The Millers had taken her money, promised safe passage from St. Louis to San Francisco, and then left her with nothing but a small carpet bag containing her few possessions. "I'll survive this," she whispered to herself, though the words held little conviction as she surveyed the endless white expanse around her. She'd fled an arranged marriage to a man 3 times her age back in Philadelphia, and now she wondered if death by freezing might be her reward for such rebellion. The first heavy snowflakes began to fall as Francine trudged forward, having no destination but unable to stay still. Each step became more difficult as the snow deepened around her ankles. The wind picked up, howling like a wild animal, drowning out her occasional cries for help. By midday, the blizzard had fully descended. Francine could barely see 3 feet ahead. Her lips had turned blue, and she could no longer feel her toes. The knowledge that she might die alone in this vast whiteness terrified her more than the cold itself. When she stumbled and fell for the 3rd time, she didn't immediately rise. The snow felt almost welcoming, like a soft bed inviting her to sleep. She knew what that meant. She'd read about freezing to death, the dangerous comfort that preceded the end. "Get up," she commanded herself, forcing her body to move when it wanted nothing more than to surrender. "Get up, Francine." It was then that she heard it, the distant sound of hooves cutting through the howl of the wind. At first, she thought she was imagining things, her mind creating comforting hallucinations before death. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. "Hello," she called, her voice weak against the storm. "Please, help me." Through the curtain of white emerged a large figure on horseback, like a specter materializing from the storm itself. The horse, a powerful black stallion, snorted and pawed at the ground while its rider, bundled against the cold, peered down at her from beneath a wide-brimmed hat crusted with snow. "Madam." The voice was deep, rough around the edges, but holding a note of concern that gave Francine hope. "What in God's name are you doing out here in this storm?" She tried to explain, but her teeth chattered so violently she could barely form words. "They left me. The wagon. They took my money and left me." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height as his boots crunched in the snow. He removed his glove and pressed a warm hand to her cheek, his blue eyes narrowing with concern beneath the brim of his hat. "You're half frozen," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his heavy buffalo coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The sudden warmth was so overwhelming that Francine almost wept. "I'm Isaac Yates. My ranch is about 2 miles from here." "Francine Galloway," she managed to say. I have nowhere to go." Isaac studied her face for a moment, seeming to make a decision. He collected her small carpet bag from where it had fallen in the snow. "Let's get you somewhere warm before you freeze to death," he said, lifting her onto his horse with surprising ease. He mounted behind her, one strong arm securing her against his chest. As they rode through the blinding snow, Francine felt herself drifting between consciousness and a dangerously inviting sleep. Isaac seemed to sense this, occasionally saying something to keep her alert, his voice an anchor in the swirling white chaos. "Stay with me, Miss Galloway," he said firmly when her head lolled back against his shoulder. Not much farther now. Through the storm, a structure gradually took shape, a substantial log ranch house with smoke curling from the chimney. As they approached, a barn and several outbuildings became visible, all dusted with thick snow. Isaac dismounted first, then lifted Francine down. Her legs buckled immediately, and he caught her before she fell, sweeping her into his arms without comment. He carried her to the porch and somehow managed to open the door while still holding her. The warmth inside hit Francine like a physical force. A large fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, flames crackling and throwing dancing shadows across the rustic but comfortable furnishings. Isaac set her down gently in a rocking chair close to the fire. "I need to see to my horse," he said. "Then we'll get you properly warmed up." "Don't move." Francine couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. As feeling painfully returned to her extremities, she took in her surroundings. The ranch house was well built and clean, with simple but sturdy furniture. A few books sat on shelves and a rifle hung over the fireplace. It was clearly a bachelor's dwelling, lacking the feminine touches she was accustomed to, but there was something inviting about its honest simplicity. When Isaac returned, he'd removed his snow-covered hat and outer layers. She could now see him properly, a man perhaps 30 years of age, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and those striking blue eyes that had first caught her attention in the storm. There was a small scar running through his right eyebrow and a weathered quality to his skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. He moved to a pot hanging near the fire, stirring its contents before pouring some into a mug. "Drink this," he said, handing it to her. "Coffee with a touch of whiskey. It'll warm you from the inside." Francine took a sip and coughed as the burn of alcohol hit her throat. Isaac's mouth quirked slightly in what might have been a smile. "Small sips," he advised, kneeling to unlace her boots. "Your feet will need attention. Frostbite's nothing to trifle with." "Mr. Yates," she began, embarrassed by his ministrations. "I can, Isaac," he corrected, continuing his task without looking up. "And no, you can't. Not yet. Those fingers are still too numb to manage bootlaces." There was something both commanding and gentle in his manner that made Francine yield without further protest. He removed her boots and sodden stockings, examining her feet with clinical attention before fetching a basin of lukewarm water. "Fortunate," he commented as he carefully placed her feet in the basin. "No frostbite, just chilled through. This might hurt some as circulation returns." It did hurt, a stinging pain that made tears spring to her eyes, but Francine bit her lip and endured it silently. Isaac noticed her discomfort and began speaking, perhaps to distract her. "I've got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. When you're feeling steadier, I'll show you there." He paused, adding more warm water to the basin. "Don't worry about explaining anything tonight. Rest first." "You're very kind, Mr. Isaac," Francine said, "but I can't impose. Perhaps when the storm clears, you could direct me to the nearest town." Isaac looked at her directly then, his expression unreadable. "Nearest town's Silver Creek, 30 miles east. In good weather, that's a full day's ride." "In this?" He gestured toward the window, where snow still fell heavily. "Could be days before anyone could travel safely." Francine's heart sank as the reality of her situation became clearer. She was completely dependent on this stranger's goodwill. "Miss Galloway," Isaac said quietly, rising to his feet. "My home is yours for as long as you need it. I won't turn anyone out into weather that would kill a wolf, let alone a young woman." The simple declaration, spoken without dramatic flourish, touched Francine deeply. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll fix us some supper," he said, moving toward what she presumed was a kitchen area. Then you should rest." As promised, Isaac prepared a simple but hearty meal of venison stew and cornbread. They ate mostly in silence, the crackling of the fire and occasional howl of wind the only sounds. Francine's strength began to return with the hot food, though exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight. After the meal, Isaac showed her to a small bedroom off the main living area. It contained a narrow bed with a quilt, a washstand, and a small chest of drawers. "It's not much," he said, lighting the lamp on the bedside table. "But it's warm. There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. I'll be in the main room if you need anything." "It's perfect," Francine assured him. "I don't know how to thank you enough." Isaac shook his head slightly. No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same. But as he closed the door behind him, Francine thought that wasn't true at all. The Millers certainly hadn't helped her when it had been inconvenient. This man had risked his own safety riding out in a blizzard, brought a complete stranger into his home, and asked nothing in return. She undressed, washed quickly with the cold water, and put on her nightgown from her carpetbag. As she slid beneath the quilt, the exhaustion of the day overwhelmed her, and she fell into a deep sleep despite the unfamiliar surroundings and uncertain future. Morning came with brilliant sunlight reflecting off the snow, streaming through the small window of Francine's room. For a moment she was disoriented, then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed quickly in the only other dress she had packed, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Isaac at a wood stove frying bacon. He glanced up as she entered, giving her a brief nod. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I had any right to expect," she answered honestly. "Thank you again for your hospitality." "Hungry?" He didn't wait for an answer, sliding bacon onto 2 plates along with some fried potatoes. "Coffee's hot." They ate breakfast at a small table, and in the clear light of day, Francine could better observe her rescuer. Isaac Yates was a handsome man in a rugged way, with strong features and capable hands. He caught her looking, and she quickly averted her eyes, focusing on her plate. "Storm stopped," he said, "but there's near 3 feet of snow out there. Roads won't be passable for at least a week, maybe longer." Francine set down her fork. "I can't impose on you for that long. It's not an imposition." He took a sip of coffee. "I've got plenty of room, plenty of supplies. Unless you've got pressing business elsewhere." She hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I have nowhere else to go. The family I was traveling with, the Millers, they robbed me of everything I had. I was heading to San Francisco to work as a teacher." Isaac's expression darkened. "The Millers, Walter and Elizabeth, traveling with 2 boys," Francine nodded, surprised. "You know them. They've been through these parts before. Walter Miller's got a reputation as a swindler. Cheated half the men in Silver Creek at cards last time he passed through." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Leaving a woman alone in a blizzard, though, that's a new low." "I should have been more cautious," Francine admitted, "but I was desperate to leave Philadelphia. My father died last year, and his business partner arranged for me to marry him to settle debts. He's 63 years old." Isaac raised an eyebrow but made no comment on her situation. Instead, he said, "Well, you're welcome here until you figure out your next steps. I could use the company, truth be told. Gets quiet out here, especially in winter." "I'd be happy to earn my keep," Francine offered quickly. "I can cook, clean, mend clothing. I'm quite handy with a needle." A faint smile touched Isaac's lips. "I won't say no to some decent cooking. Been living on my own fare too long." He stood, gathering their empty plates. "I've got chores to tend to. Make yourself at home." After Isaac left to care for his livestock, Francine took stock of the ranch house. It was sturdy and well built, but clearly needed a woman's touch. She found a broom and began sweeping, then tackled the dishes from breakfast. By midday, she'd cleaned the main living area thoroughly and was examining the contents of the larder, planning dinner. When Isaac returned, stamping snow from his boots, he paused in the doorway, taking in the transformed space. Francine had found some pine boughs and arranged them on the mantel, their scent freshening the room. The floor was swept, surfaces dusted, and a stew simmered on the stove. "You didn't need to do all this," he said, but there was appreciation in his voice. "I wanted to," she replied simply. "I found some venison and vegetables. I hope you don't mind that I started dinner." "Mind, it smells better than anything I've cooked in years." He hung his coat by the door. "You'll spoil me, Miss Galloway." "Francine, please," she insisted, "and it's the least I can do." They fell into a comfortable routine over the next few days. Isaac would handle the outdoor chores, caring for his horses and small herd of cattle, chopping wood, checking his property boundaries, while Francine took charge of the household tasks. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes conversing about their lives. Francine learned that Isaac had come west after the war between the states, having served in the Union Army. He'd worked as a cowhand on several ranches before saving enough to purchase this modest spread 5 years ago. He lived alone, having never married, though he had occasional help from a local man named Thomas during busy seasons. "What about family?" Francine asked one evening 4 days into her stay. "Do you have relatives nearby?" Isaac's expression grew guarded. "Parents died when I was young, raised mostly by an uncle in Ohio, no siblings." He stared into the fire. "What about you, besides the father you mentioned?" "My mother passed when I was 12. No siblings either." Francine hesitated. "Father and I were close, but his business failed in the panic last year. When he died, I discovered he'd been heavily in debt to his partner, Mr. Hargrove." The marriage arrangement was Hargrove's idea of collecting what was owed. "And you refused." "I ran," she corrected. "Like a coward. Left in the night with what little money I had saved from teaching music to local children." Isaac considered this. "Doesn't sound like cowardice to me." "Sounds like survival." He added a log to the fire. "A person has a right to choose their own path, even a woman." Francine looked at him in surprise. Such a progressive view wasn't common, especially among men in the territories. "That's a generous perspective," he shrugged. "Seen enough of the world to know that forcing people into situations they don't choose rarely ends well for anyone." On the 5th morning, Francine woke to the sound of voices. Dressing quickly, she emerged to find Isaac speaking with a large, bearded man in the main room. "Ah, there she is," Isaac said, turning to her. "Francine, this is Thomas Morgan, who helps me on the ranch. Thomas, Miss Francine Galloway." Thomas removed his hat, revealing thinning red hair. "Madam, heard how Isaac here found you in the storm." "Lucky thing he was out checking fence lines that day." "Very lucky," Francine agreed, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Morgan." "Thomas made it through the snow to check on things," Isaac explained. "He's brought news from town, too." "Roads should be clear enough for wagons in another 3 days or so," Thomas said. "Storm hit everyone hard. Oh, and there's talk the stage line might be hiring a new school teacher for Silver Creek come spring." "Thought you might be interested, Miss Galloway," Isaac having mentioned your teaching experience. Francine's pulse quickened. "A teaching position? In Silver Creek?" "Nothing certain," Thomas cautioned, "but Mrs. Peterson, who's been teaching there, is expecting her 4th child and wants to retire. Town's growing enough to need a proper schoolmarm." That's wonderful news," Francine said, her mind racing with possibilities. A teaching position would mean independence, stability. Silver Creek's only about 3 hours' ride from here, Isaac added, his expression unreadable. Thomas, you'll stay for breakfast. As Thomas and Isaac discussed ranch business over breakfast, Francine contemplated this new development. A teaching position would solve her immediate problem of having no destination, but it would also mean leaving Isaac's ranch. The thought brought an unexpected pang of regret. In less than a week, she'd grown accustomed to his quiet presence, to their evenings by the fire, to the rhythm of life in this remote but peaceful place. After breakfast, Thomas departed, promising to return in a few days once the roads were more passable. Francine busied herself with cleaning up while Isaac prepared to head out to check on some cattle in a sheltered valley to the north. "I'll be gone most of the day," he said, pulling on his heavy coat. "There's plenty of food if you get hungry before I return." "Isaac," Francine said impulsively, "would it be possible? That is, if it's not too much trouble. Could I accompany you part of the way? I haven't been outside since the storm, and I'd love some fresh air." He looked surprised by her request, but nodded. "It's cold out there and the snow's deep in places. You'll need warmer clothes than what you've got." He disappeared into his bedroom, returning with a spare coat, gloves, and a woolen scarf. "These will swallow you whole, but they'll keep you warm." The coat indeed hung almost to Francine's ankles, and she had to roll the sleeves several times, but when they stepped outside into the brilliant winter sunshine, she was grateful for its warmth. The landscape was transformed into a dazzling white expanse that took her breath away. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking careful steps through the packed snow of the yard. "Different kind of beauty than what you're used to, I expect," Isaac commented, leading the way toward a small hill behind the house. "Philadelphia must have its own charms." "It does," Francine admitted, "but they're man-made charms. This," she gestured at the vast snow-covered plains stretching to distant mountains, "this is something else entirely." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, climbing gradually up the gentle slope. At the top, Isaac stopped, and Francine caught her breath at the vista before them. The ranch lay below, a collection of sturdy buildings nestled in a protective hollow with miles of white blanketed prairie beyond. "Your land?" she asked. Isaac nodded. 600 acres. "Not the biggest spread in Colorado, but it's mine, free and clear. Started with just 50 acres and that cabin." He pointed to a small structure near the barn. "Built the main house myself, piece by piece." Pride resonated in his voice, and Francine felt a swell of admiration. "You've created something remarkable here. It's a good life," he said simply. "Hard work, but good." He glanced at her. "Different from city living, though." "I think I prefer it," she said truthfully. "There's an honesty to life here." In Philadelphia, everything was about appearances, about who knew whom, about maintaining a position in society even when there was nothing behind it. Isaac studied her for a moment, then pointed to a distant line of trees. "I need to head that way to check on the herd." "Too far for you in this snow, I think." "I'll head back," Francine agreed. "Thank you for bringing me up here. The view was worth the cold toes." His mouth quirked in that almost smile she was coming to recognize. "Be careful on the descent. Snow makes everything treacherous." She was halfway down the slope when her foot hit an icy patch beneath the snow. With a startled cry, Francine lost her balance, tumbling forward. She rolled several yards down the hill before coming to a stop, momentarily stunned. "Francine." Isaac's voice reached her before she could gather her wits. He was beside her in moments, kneeling in the snow. "Are you hurt?" "Only my pride," she gasped, trying to sit up. But when she put weight on her right wrist, pain shot up her arm. "Oh, perhaps not only my pride." Isaac gently took her wrist in his hands, his touch unexpectedly delicate for such a large man. He carefully rotated it, watching her face. Not broken, I think, just sprained, but we should bind it. Without hesitation, he unwound his scarf and wrapped it securely around her wrist. The sudden proximity brought with it an awareness of him that Francine hadn't fully acknowledged before, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the careful precision of his movements, the concerned furrow between his brows. "Thank you," she said, suddenly breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with her fall. "Let's get you back to the house," he said, helping her to her feet. But instead of releasing her, he kept one arm around her waist. "Lean on me. No sense risking another fall." The walk back was slower, more deliberate, with Isaac supporting her despite her protests that she could manage. At the house, he insisted on examining her wrist again by the fire, rewrapping it with a proper bandage from his medical supplies. "You're quite skilled at this," Francine observed as he secured the bandage. "Learned out of necessity," he replied. "Out here, you either become your own doctor or you suffer. Hold still now." His fingers brushed against her pulse point, and Francine was certain he must feel the way her heart raced at his touch. She found herself studying his face, the concentration in his blue eyes, the firm set of his mouth. The small scar that she now noticed continued from his eyebrow to his temple. "How did you get this?" she asked impulsively, her good hand reaching up to trace the scar before she could consider the impropriety of such a gesture. Isaac went still, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment neither moved, her fingertips resting lightly against his skin. "Saber cut," he finally said, his voice lower than usual. "Battle of the wilderness. I was lucky an inch lower and I'd have lost the eye." Francine slowly withdrew her hand, aware she had crossed some invisible boundary. "I'm sorry, both for the injury and for my forwardness." He finished binding her wrist in silence, then stood abruptly. "You should rest that arm. I still need to check on the herd. I'll be back before dark." After he left, Francine sat by the fire, confused by the sudden tension between them. Had she offended him with her touch? Or was it something else, something in the way he had looked at her? A recognition of the same inexplicable pull she felt toward him. The days that followed brought a gradual thaw, both of the snow outside and the momentary awkwardness between them. Isaac was solicitous about her injury, but careful to maintain a certain distance. Francine, for her part, tried to focus on the practical aspects of her situation. The roads would soon be passable, and she would need to make decisions about her future. Thomas returned a week after Francine's arrival at the ranch, confirming that the road to Silver Creek was now open. "Stage is running again," he informed them over coffee. "And I asked about that teaching position. School board's meeting next week to discuss it formally, but Mrs. Peterson's definitely stepping down. If you're interested, Miss Galloway, you might want to present yourself to them soon." "Thank you, Thomas," Francine said, glancing at Isaac. "That's very helpful." That evening, after Thomas had gone, Francine broached the subject as they sat by the fire. "I should go to Silver Creek soon," she said, "to inquire about the teaching position." Isaac nodded, his eyes on the flames. "It would be a good opportunity for you." "Yes." Francine hesitated. "I want to thank you, Isaac. You've been more than generous, taking in a stranger, sharing your home." "You're hardly a stranger anymore," he said quietly. The words hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Francine gathered her courage. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about how different my life has become in such a short time. 2 weeks ago, I was fleeing an unwanted marriage. Now I'm considering putting down roots in a town I've never seen." "Silver Creek's a decent place," Isaac said. "Good people for the most part. You'd be respected there as a teacher." "And what about you?" she asked, her heart pounding. "What will you do when I'm gone?" His eyes met hers. "Same as I've always done. Work the ranch, get by." "Will you be lonely?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Isaac was silent for a long moment. "I've been alone most of my life, Francine. I'm accustomed to it." "Being accustomed to something doesn't mean it's what you want," she said softly. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the moonlit snow. "What I want," he began, then stopped. "It doesn't matter. You have a chance at a new beginning in Silver Creek. A respectable position, independence." Francine rose and crossed to stand behind him. "And if I said there might be something else I want more than independence?" Isaac turned, his expression guarded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that these days here with you, they've changed me." "Changed what I thought I wanted." She took a deep breath. "I'm saying that the thought of leaving this place, leaving you, hurts more than I expected." "Francine." Her name was almost a groan. "You barely know me." "I know enough," she countered. "I know you're kind and honorable. I know you work hard and take pride in what you've built. I know I feel more at home here after a week than I ever did in Philadelphia." He shook his head, though whether in denial or disbelief, she couldn't tell. "You deserve better than a rough rancher with nothing to offer but a hard life in a remote place. Shouldn't I be the one to decide what I deserve?" Francine stepped closer, emboldened by the intensity in his eyes. "Isaac, I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just asking if you feel anything of what I'm feeling." For an agonizing moment he stood motionless. Then, with a swiftness that stole her breath, his hands came up to frame her face. "God help me, I do," he whispered, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question asked and answered in the press of lips. Then it deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary, a revelation of feelings too complex for words. Francine's good hand found the back of his neck, fingers threading into his hair, anchoring herself to him as the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he murmured. "Life is complicated," she countered. "That doesn't mean we shouldn't live it fully." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his features. "When did you get so wise, Francine Galloway?" "Perhaps somewhere between being abandoned in a blizzard and falling in love with the man who rescued me," she answered, her boldness surprising even herself. Isaac's eyes widened at her words. "Love. Francine, be certain. This isn't gratitude or confusion, it's neither," she interrupted firmly. "I know my own heart, Isaac Yates. I've never been more certain of anything." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her as if she were something precious. "I never expected this," he confessed against her hair. "Never thought I'd find someone like you out here in the middle of nowhere." "Perhaps we were meant to find each other," Francine suggested, content in his embrace. They spent the rest of the evening talking, making tentative plans, exploring this newfound territory between them. Isaac suggested she still visit Silver Creek, meet with the school board, and consider her options carefully before making any permanent decisions. "I don't want you to choose me out of limited options," he explained. "If you decide to stay, I want it to be because this life this hard, sometimes lonely life is truly what you want." Francine agreed, recognizing the wisdom in his caution. 2 days later, Isaac drove her into Silver Creek in his wagon, a journey that took just over 3 hours through the melting snow. The town was larger than she'd expected, with several streets of businesses, a church, and even a small hotel where Isaac arranged for her to stay. "I'll come back in 3 days," he said as they stood outside the hotel. "That should give you time to meet with the school board and get a feel for the town." 3 days will feel like an eternity," Francine said, already missing the warmth of his presence. He smiled slightly, touching her cheek in a brief caress. "Use the time wisely. Ask questions. Make sure this is a place you could be happy." Silver Creek proved to be a welcoming community. The school board was impressed with Francine's educational background and eagerly offered her the position beginning in the spring term. She toured the small schoolhouse, met some of the town's prominent citizens, and even attended Sunday services at the local church, where she was introduced to many families whose children would be her students. Yet despite the town's charm and the security the teaching position would provide, Francine found her thoughts continually returning to Isaac's ranch. To the quiet evenings by the fire, the vast beauty of the landscape, and most of all, to Isaac himself, his strength, his quiet integrity, his unexpected gentleness. When the third day arrived, Francine was waiting outside the hotel with her carpetbag, having already made her decision. As Isaac's wagon appeared on the main street, her heart leapt with a certainty she had never felt before. He pulled the team to a stop before her, his expression carefully neutral. "Well, what did you think of Silver Creek?" "It's a lovely town," Francine said, climbing onto the wagon seat beside him. "The school board offered me the position." Isaac nodded, his hands tightening on the reins. "Congratulations. When would you start?" "That's just it," Francine said, turning to face him fully. "I've decided not to accept their offer." His head snapped toward her, surprise evident in his features. "What? Why?" "Because while Silver Creek is charming, it's not where my heart is," she said simply. "My heart is at a ranch about 3 hours from here with a man who found me in the snow and brought me home." Isaac's expression softened, hope replacing surprise. "Francine, are you certain? Teaching would give you independence, security, and a life without you," she finished for him. "I don't want that, Isaac. I want to build something with you if you'll have me." For an answer, he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her close, kissing her there in the middle of Silver Creek's main street, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. "I love you," he said against her lips. "Have since that first night watching you sleep by my fire, looking so damn brave after everything you'd been through." "Then take me home," Francine whispered. They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's small church, with Thomas Morgan and his wife as witnesses. The ceremony was simple, but Francine, in a new dress purchased with money Isaac had insisted on giving her, felt as beautiful and cherished as any bride in a grand Philadelphia wedding. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers across the prairie and new beginnings for the newlyweds. Isaac expanded the ranch house, adding 2 more rooms and improving the kitchen facilities. Francine planted a garden and convinced Isaac to invest in some chickens and a milk cow, bringing a more varied diet to their table. Their life together was not without challenges. The summer brought drought, threatening the cattle herd and forcing Isaac to work from dawn until well after dusk to ensure their survival. Francine learned to manage the household alone during these times, discovering reserves of strength and resourcefulness she hadn't known she possessed. By autumn, the ranch was flourishing again, and with the cooler weather came news that thrilled them both. Francine was expecting their first child. "A baby," Isaac breathed, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Francine asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "More than I ever thought possible," he answered honestly. "When I found you in that snowstorm, I thought I was just saving a stranger's life. I never imagined I was finding my own future." As Francine's pregnancy progressed, Isaac became even more protective, insisting on hiring additional help around the ranch so he could spend more time close to home. Thomas Morgan's teenage son, Samuel, proved adept at ranch work and eager to learn from Isaac. Winter returned, bringing with it memories of their first meeting. On the anniversary of the day Isaac had found her in the storm, He surprised Francine with a gift, a small silver locket containing a tiny portrait of them both, painted by a traveling artist who had passed through Silver Creek. "So our child will always know the story of how we found each other," he explained as she admired it. Their son, James Thomas Yates, was born on a clear April morning in 1874, with the assistance of Mrs. Morgan and the doctor from Silver Creek. Isaac, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom during the birth, was overcome with emotion when Francine placed the tiny, red-faced infant in his arms. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered, cradling his son with a gentleness that brought tears to Francine's eyes. "He looks like you," she observed, noting the thatch of dark hair and strong features already evident in the newborn's face. Life with a baby brought new rhythms and challenges to the ranch. Isaac proved to be a natural father, taking James with him for short rides around the property when the weather was fair, singing old trail songs to soothe him to sleep, and building a sturdy cradle that could be rocked with a foot while hands remained busy with other tasks. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Isaac purchased additional land and expanded the herd. Francine, finding herself missing teaching, began to hold informal lessons for Samuel Morgan and several other children from neighboring ranches. What started as occasional gatherings soon became a regular 3-day-a-week school in a room Isaac converted from a storage area. "You found a way to have it all, haven't you?" Isaac observed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching 2-year-old James chase fireflies in the yard. "Teaching, family, the ranch life. I've found something better than all," Francine corrected, leaning against his shoulder. "I've found exactly what I need." The years passed with the changing seasons, each bringing its own joys and trials. Their family grew with the birth of a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1876, and another son, William, in 1879. The ranch expanded as well, becoming one of the most successful in the county. Francine's small school gained a reputation for excellence, eventually prompting the building of a proper schoolhouse on the edge of their property. Isaac, proud of his wife's accomplishments, made sure the building was well constructed and supplied, even traveling to Denver to purchase books and materials. Life wasn't always easy. A particularly harsh winter in 1881 threatened their livelihood when several cattle were lost to the cold. The following summer brought illness, a fever that swept through the area, touching nearly every family. James and Elizabeth recovered quickly, but young William lingered between life and death for nearly a week before finally turning the corner toward recovery. Through it all, Isaac and Francine's bond only strengthened. Their partnership, born in that desperate moment when he'd found her half frozen in the snow, had grown into something rare and precious, a love built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and unwavering commitment. In the summer of 1883, 10 years after their first meeting, they hosted a gathering at the ranch to celebrate their anniversary. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, including several of Francine's former students who had gone on to colleges in the East. As evening fell, lanterns were lit around the yard and someone began playing a fiddle. Isaac took Francine's hand, leading her into an impromptu dance beneath the stars. "Happy?" he asked, his voice soft in her ear as they moved to the music. Francine looked around at the life they had built together, their children playing with friends, their home warm and welcoming, the land they had nurtured stretching out around them. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" Isaac's smile was all the answer she needed, but he added words anyway. "That day in the snowstorm when I said my home was yours, I had no idea you would become my home, Francine. Wherever you are, that's where I belong." As they danced under the vast Colorado sky, Francine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate young woman fleeing an unwanted future to a beloved wife, mother, and teacher, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined on that snowy day 10 years ago. She had been left in the snow with nowhere to go, and a cowboy had found her. His simple offer of shelter had become the foundation for a lifetime of love, proving that sometimes the most desperate moments can lead to the greatest blessings. The Yates family continued to thrive in the years that followed. James grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's quiet strength and his mother's love of learning. At 18, he left for college in Denver, returning with new ideas for modernizing the ranch operations. Elizabeth, spirited and determined, became an accomplished horsewoman and eventually married the son of a neighboring rancher, combining their lands to create an even larger operation. William, the youngest, inherited his mother's teaching abilities and eventually took over the school she had founded, expanding it to accommodate the growing population as Colorado approached statehood. Isaac and Francine watched their family and community grow with pride and contentment. Even as they entered their later years, they maintained the deep connection that had begun that fateful day in the snowstorm. Each winter, on the anniversary of their meeting, Isaac would take Francine to the spot where he had found her, and they would remember how close they had come to never finding each other at all. In the summer of 1903, 30 years after their first meeting, they sat together on the porch of their ranch house, watching their grandchildren play in the yard that Francine had once made beautiful with flowers and trees. "Did you ever imagine this?" Francine asked, her hand resting comfortably in Isaac's. Though time had silvered their hair and lined their faces, the love between them remained undiminished. "Never," Isaac admitted with a smile. "I was a solitary man, content with my own company. Or so I thought until a beautiful woman stumbled into my life during a blizzard. And changed everything," Francine finished for him. "For the better," Isaac added, raising her hand to his lips in a gesture that had become familiar over their decades together. As the sun set over the Colorado plains, they both loved, casting long shadows across the prosperous ranch they had built together. Francine reflected on the journey of her life. From the desperate young woman abandoned in the snow to the matriarch of a thriving family, her path had been unexpected but infinitely rewarding. "I love you, Isaac Yates," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she'd spoken them. "And I love you, Francine Yates," he replied, his blue eyes still bright despite his 70 years, holding the same warmth they had shown her in that snowstorm so long ago. "Always have, always will." In that moment, as in countless moments before, Francine knew with absolute certainty that being left in the snow had led her not to disaster but to her destiny, a life filled with love, purpose, and the enduring warmth of a true home.